Ok, thank you. Bonjour tout le monde.
Good morning, everyone. I'd like I'd like to start my intervention with you by greeting the audience here to share our ideas to animate the debate so that we can better understand the problematic of the housing sector in Haiti. Before I get into the subject, I'd like to, in a certain context, talk in the context that Haiti is Haiti was in 2010. I would say some days or some days later to get after the catastrophe, we had 2.5 million people who were living under tents throughout the metropolitan area of Port-au-Prince. You have to understand everybody was panicked because a lot of information was being circulated and urging people not to stay in their house. So people were really afraid to go back to their houses. And then after that, after they noticed that a lot of people died and a lot of houses were destroyed. So that caused the people to feel insecure. And so they lived together in areas that had no infrastructure, no service, so without any service, with absolutely nothing. Um, Later on, the international community began to react. We received a lot of help, urgent and much needed help. I have to also tell you that when we received help, that aid, we thought of it. We thought that it was help that we were giving to Haiti after a catastrophe. We never realized that it was a procedure that is activated automatically once there is a catastrophe that occurred in the world. So we thought that everybody, so we just cross our arms and waiting for the people to help us. Evidently, there was a lot of organizations, international organizations or NGOs that are specialized that to answer to disasters. They came with lots of materials. They came with water, potable water. They came with things that they were distributing to the population fairly. But I have to tell you also, you have to understand the way Haitians think. Haitians are a bit individualist. We're very individualistic. We're not thinking yet in terms of the collectivity. It's a procedure that's going to take time. It's a process that's going to take time. First of all, you have to notice Haitians think of themselves first, and you can see that's sort of mentality. That is why we're at that level. Everybody is trying to save themselves to find a place to live because they don't have the notion of state, because we don't have a real strong state structure yet. So what happened? There are a lot of organizations that say that since there are a lot of people who don't have houses, so they have to develop some programs, some construction programs, or some kind of shelter for the people. So there was a lot of money at that time. So there was a program that they came up with and they built a lot of shelters. So there millions of dollars were spent. They built houses. They imported materials. They gave a lot of people of temporary housing. They gave so many temporary housing to some families. The father received. The mother, and the children receive houses separately. In the same space, you could have three houses separately. Because of the response that they wanted to give was to give people a place to stay right away. Because the emotional shock at the time was so strong, that was so intense, that there was no real planification. And after that catastrophe, the government was completely out of its power to do things, because to administer the help that it was receiving. In other words, so there was no coordination, and this is why we had that results. And then after that, there was a lot of false rumors that were being circulated, since they were trying to have figure out exactly some people came from the provinces who came to live in the camps. Because this is how so a lot of people, they don't pay for water, they don't pay for electricity, they were feeding them, and they were hoping that they were going to find housing. That's number one. Number two, the second thing that happened also, it is that we know that the Haitians, it is one that is over time weakened, and since the follows leadership, we never thought about creating a strong state, even though we have a constitution that recognizes indeed the right to housing for all, but the government never really created the infrastructure so Haitians can have access to decent housing. So this is why when it comes to weakening the rural community, a lot of people are living people are going to areas, urban areas where there's basic infrastructure. Since there is no access to these kinds of infrastructure, the areas that are infrastructure, the area that is so expensive, so the people went and lived and moved to the peripheries. So you can notice that wherever you go, you see a city, there is an urban area. There's always a channel or shanty town that accompanies it. Why? Because the government never plans. There's an urban planification. So even once a person has a piece of land, they build a little house to live on it. Since there is not a real serious thinking, thorough thinking that's done to this, you can see that for every square meter is occupied. People are calling each other and saying, "Well, I found a little piece of land in Port-au-Prince. Why don't you come and move there too?" So if you live in a system of completely that is completely informal, parallel to the neighborhoods that are integrated, you also have shanty towns. People who have income. So for people to not live, for people to not pay for transportation, they come and live in shanty towns, so they don't have to go every time when they have to go to work. They can just, if they, for instance, if they live in the people who live in Jalousie, for instance, they move to Jalousie because they work in Pétionville, so they create that shanty town. So what they do is they for instance, the word jalousie is remember recently the word that was called Cité Soleil. A lot of people left Cité Soleil to live to other place. You know, people move to areas also so they can say that they live. Okay, he's going too fast. He's talking too fast. Can somebody tell him? On va parler trop vite. On va parler trop vite. Ouais. Yeah, parlons petit Jean-Pierre doucement. He's talking too fast. This is what explains the problematic, all the crises that we're dealing with. Discussing the problematic of all the issues that we're dealing with recently. They're telling they don't have access to housing. Indeed, the Haitian government is in the situation. Either you leave things as is, as they are, and it becomes a serious social problem. It is because it was easier. It was easier when a bandit commits an act. It's easy for him to go and live in the tents, and go hide in the camps. And you know that in all societies there are bandits, even in most developed societies. So Haiti is part of that role too. Yeah, of course, because of the urban poverty. I know because of the economic problems we have in Haiti, some people get into the banditism, become bandits. We also have to recognize that Haitians work hard. They send their kids to school because they know that for them to get out of that situation, they have to educate their children. But so some people in their very nature, they tend to be bandits. So the Haitian government was in the situation. So we either leave things as is or we take our responsibility. So they came up with a program to see how they can resolve the problem, so they can reduce the level of banditry. All the shanty towns in Haiti, the people who come and build their houses. They build the houses. They build at night. So government cannot. So the government can. So they can. So government can. I'm sorry. But now government says now to address this issue, which is so complex, we have to first of all start thinking strategically. What do we do? After, they create UCLDC. First of all, it is a it is a coordination of a series of intervention that was being done by the international by NGOs, and secondly, it came up after a series of reflection with a public policy for housing, for public housing. We thought in the long term, we thought that housing is part of urban planification. Government has to create an organized space to allow Haitian families that are building those houses, because construction is, the government could try to do that in an area that is already open. So urban planification. I see housing in its whole, including social housing. We created the PBLS because they had the social housing, which goal is to work with families so they can create the possibility for them to have their own houses, to build their own houses. There was a lot of programs that were financed by the World Bank and also by the IADB during the 1980s. They kind of helped Indian, not just Haiti, but a lot of countries, the third world countries, including in Africa and also Haiti. But at the time, in the United, they gave those people a small piece of land of 50 square meters, and after that, when they stopped giving this aid, the people were left to themselves. So all these interventions, all those neighborhoods, they became shanty towns, and it got to the point where the people lost their money. Okay, there was an issue of income. The Haitian people get paid. A lot of people get paid like less than $2 a day. Housing is not just, for instance, I'm buying a phone, I'm buying a car. You have to see housing as a project, a project to create a space for people to live. So what happened nowadays? After the earthquake, the World Bank, USAID, IADB came up with projects, a housing project. But what they had to consider, it is a partial project. So they can create small villages. Evidently, they didn't have enough resources because they spend a lot of the money in the humanitarian resources. They work on certain networks for housing because they did not think about the service. They didn't think about things such as water, potable water, because the government think that these services like water have to be paid by the homeowners or renters. Even if you build those houses, you should not be building things if the people are not going to be able to pay for them. In Haiti, if it's 12, 15, the government came up with a village guys. It is an approach to show that indeed you can live in a context that is more appropriate, where you have the basic services, you have houses. Some people have houses that are very small, like 32 square meters. Don't forget that those people, before that, they were living in spaces that are 12 square meters. Let me tell you a little story, for instance. When we began to choose people, we had about 1,280 people. We received 9,000 demands for housing. Some of them were the direct result of the earthquake, and also we have to think about the income, the minimal income of the people. The families cannot have more than 5 children because we thought about the livable space. So what happened when we began to work for build houses for those first families? Whenever project you're working on, there's always manipulative elements. For, for instance, we created a park, a park for people can live and or also they can rent. So we would have to have a national lottery, so people could choose, and if they had an opportunity, so those who had the opportunity to get into the lottery and win, they could have housing that way. At that time, we said that people had to pay 2,500 goods per month. But what happened is that there were certain elements that we weren't expecting. There were two choices. You either you or the government would have to act. That's why we explained to the people. We had a training session with them. We to explain to them that the project that we had, it was not a project like like USAID like USAID project for instance. It wasn't. The international community gave those people those houses, but it was a response at the moment. That is just to show. It was just an example of a space where people could live. So there was a segment of the population that could live there. We built the houses, but we didn't have to do it to build them. Now the people who live in those houses, they will tell us that the houses that we used to live compared to the ones where we live now, there is a great difference. We're living better. So the population is also aware. When people go live somewhere, the person make a choice. The person is living in a very difficult position. So sometimes when you ask a person, when you give something to a person, like in terms of housing, perhaps they're going to ask you for the pool. So the best thing to do is for the state to create housing, to encourage private investment. The government can come up with what we call the infrastructure. We will make the land viable, and then leave indeed the private sector to build those houses. Perhaps houses that people can buy, or perhaps housing that they can rent. But the demand is enormous that the current government is trying to do. Is having small victories, but you cannot really resolve the issues. This is an issue that can be resolved at very long term. So you have to consider the housing issue in terms of urban planification. This is what had never been done. There's a great pressure. That the more people try to come and live, There's Haitian statistics show that the population growth in West went from 43 to in 2005. We have to deal with the issue right now because you have to prepare for more people who are going to be coming to the area. Oh, thank God that he's done because he's difficult to train. He talks too fast.